Welcome to At Home Radio, which is about feeling at home where we are, whether we're in our own space or out in the world. I'm Kate Thomas, and my guest today is author and longtime marketing communications professional, Berenice Kleiman. Her books include One Stroke, Two Survivors, The Incredible Journey of Berenice and Herb Kleiman, and Lessons Learned, Stroke Recovery from a Caregiver's Perspective. Welcome, Berenice.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's good to have you. Your husband and business partner, Herb Kleiman, lived for 20 years with the after effects of a devastating stroke. Herb passed away in April of this year. That was early in the COVID pandemic, and you experienced your life shutting down on many levels, including having to conduct a memorial service in your backyard. Your still to be published book, Widowhood 101 Next Steps, grew out of your frustration at the barrage of unanticipated problems facing the bereaved when they are least prepared. So, Berenice, what kinds of problems did you face, and how overwhelming were they for you?
Well, Kathy, imagine that's first the loss, and 20 years head time does not in any way take you away from the grieving. But all of a sudden, everything turns upside down, the things that you used to. For your viewers, imagine no funds. Everything is frozen. No pension.
Because of the pandemic, mainly, or other reasons?
You suddenly have to establish your own identity as well as to prove that your husband is dead. I mean, that's with all the offices closed. You don't have a death certificate. I offered the cremation certificate, but it wasn't approved. So without the death certificate, suddenly, how do you establish that he's dead so that you can suddenly begin to open up, whether it's insurances? And I was prepared. I had the wills that had been updated. I had all the powers of attorney. I had whatever the books and writings had said I would need, but it was insufficient. For example, with my husband's pension, they wanted my original Social Security card. Now, I was 12 years old when I applied for it. And I was told at that time, lose it, put it away, never carry it, memorize the number. Well, I sent them, and it took months for them to even respond, this pension company, to respond, and that with their grieving packet apparently got lost in the mail. But that was where they wanted it. They turned down the pension because the card was insufficient. And then I asked the woman, I called because there was a number on pension slip. It was in a home with a baby crying, a dog barking. And when I asked to speak to a superior, none was available. So I then sent a letter, no response to my letter, only another turn down, and no way to get back at them and say, wait a minute. So I wrote to the president of the company that had granted this foremost institute. And I said, is this the way that you treat the spouses, the widows of your former employees? And after weeks of battling, I finally had an answer. But even they ran into problems because they couldn't get through to this company. And when the company finally responded, and I knew that they knew where I was because the only message I had after a month of 2 months of trying to get their attention was that they had debited the amount of the pension from my checking account. So and then I had calls from different places.
They had debited it rather than added.
And they claimed that they didn't know how to reach me. Eventually, they sent a check, but not putting it back electronically. The check got lost in the mail. And it went on. I had 3 months of back payments due, plus the initial one beginning August 1st, nothing coming in. And that also meant that because I didn't have the death certificate, I could not access the now single account for my brokerage. I could not, it took 2 months to get the death certificate.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I solved this with this pension company, finally, because I said, and I said this to the company itself, not to the pension company, you either will deposit it electronically or I'm going to call the papers. So it was, the check eventually came in, but a month late. So when it was all settled and done, and I'd had my back payments and my current payment, I said to this, not the pension company, which I refused to deal with, to this company that my husband had been with, that I wanted 4 things from them. I wanted 2 apologies, one from the pension company, one from my husband's company. They had told me I was an exception. Everybody else would have to have their social security number. And I said I wanted that policy changed. I wanted other people able to prove that they had offers of choices, options, and I wanted 10 pounds of Hershey's chocolate kisses to make up for the 10 pounds of kisses I ate in those months. I did get the apologies, the 2. I did get them to change the policy, but I did not get the chocolate kisses. They said that was going too far.
Maybe it got lost in the mail.
Perhaps. But what this meant, and what I haven't read it anywhere, but I figured out, is that with the change of the Medicare cards, the driver's licenses, your social security number is no longer easily accessible. Mm-hmm. And that is what people don't know. They're going to be met with a scavenger hunt because who keeps it? Another problem was the original marriage certificate. Now, the day after Herb died, my son and I went to the bank because somewhere I had heard that you have to empty out your lockbox. And I put it in a big folder. There was no money in it, just papers. But the day after, with COVID, the bank closed. So I don't know how other people have done this. Yeah. But I couldn't find my marriage certificate. And I was afraid that I'd have to tell my children that they were illegitimate. And then I went through the pile of papers I had emptied, and my marriage certificate was caught. It was wrapped in the newspaper clipping of the marriage. So then I could begin to go to Social Security because they wanted the original, not a copy. And I had birth certificates to provide to all these places. And it was a scavenger hunt, just trying to find all these things to settle my life, get some funds going because accounts had to be changed. Mm-hmm. And what I learned and what I'm passing on to others is that you have to have copies of everything. And don't have an aging lawyer who retires because even that paperwork won't be available to you. So what I've passed on each of my chapters and what I call Next Steps, Widowhood 101, is that you have to not only you no longer say storage boxes of things. You have a computer, but computers die. Mm-hmm. Hard drives die. Houses burn down. So you have to have it in the clouds with everything. Evernote is what my son has taught me so that he, as my executor to my estate, has access and can share. And I have it also backed up in paper and in other things, but all these forms. And I had to pay extra to my lawyer to have him convert paper to electronic, which shouldn't be a big deal. But we all need to know these things.
Right. And you were prepared. You had everything you thought you needed, and you still went on this scavenger hunt.
Yes, I was shocked. But, again, it was a distraction from the grieving. Yes. An unwelcome distraction. My husband died. We had, as you said, the memorial service in the backyard. no one could come. In the Jewish tradition, you have Shiva, which is comparable almost, but longer than a wake among my Christian friends. And my son and I were alone. My son had been in Florida, and I called him and said that we were nearing the end. So he drove day and night to be with me. But it was an interruption to the grieving that I needed. And that since there was no one else around, people weren't sending food. How do you send food? People weren't knocking on your doors. Mm-hmm. I call it the world turned upside down, but we were alone. And yet, although we were limited to 10 people in our backyard, my son made the most of this because he's an electronic whiz, and he had all kinds of cameras and computers set up in the backyard so that my daughter in Falls Church, Virginia, could deliver a eulogy. My brother-in-law, Herb's brother in Atlanta, Georgia, had a eulogy. And working with his friends in LA and other places, they overnight came up with a video of the memorial service, which we could send out around the world.
Yeah.
So
that's a bright spot.
That was a bright spot.
You could share that with people.
But it was a rotten, cold, miserable, cold, freezing day. And people, even neighbors, they knew that they couldn't be in the count of 10. So they stood in the driveway huddling. So, but it was a warm, intimate service and very special.
Yes. Well, clearly, this was a terrible time on so many levels. Why did you relive it by writing a book?
Well, it goes back to a long time ago. In an early job, I had a boss who said, don't bring me your problems, bring me your solutions. And it served as the way that I think and process. So with stroke, I found people, Kirk Douglas wrote A Stroke of Luck. I didn't think it was luck. Others wrote about how they turned to poetry or to God. I wanted to know, how do you toilet? How do you keep doors open when there are separate silos and different doctors won't talk to each other? How do you make it work and bring them home, even when you're directed to skilled nursing? And each chapter then ended with lessons learned, what I shared. And I went on the attack with this. Mm-hmm. And I resented not being able to grieve, but I found other ways. And I decided to turn my grieving into lessons that I learned and to apply the same method and share it with others with the next steps. And to do this, I didn't just want to introduce my own pandemic experience, but I wanted to find out how others had handled this. So I went to friends and friends of friends and talked about the challenges with the paperwork and the challenges with how they got their lives back on track. And with the paperwork, I ran into friends who, when the husband died, and this was before COVID, could not find the cemetery certificates. They had a cemetery coming up, a burial. And in Judaism, it's pretty fast. And they had to go through their whole home and tear everything apart because the synagogue had closed. The cemetery did not have their information. And this was just one of different kinds of problems that people ran into, including even the marriage certificate. After 50 or 60 years, you don't quite refer to it.
It's not top of mind.
One couldn't find, it's so many different things that you don't think of. Mm-hmm. And these aren't written down anywhere. So I thought it was an opportunity to just write these things down, share them. I contacted about 40 of my friends, men and women, widows, widowers, I went back only about 10 years, but their experiences, what they learned, what they found out, the problems. And one of the problems that we all agreed upon is that even friends of long standing drop you. It's, I found that out with stroke also. They were afraid that stroke would be contagious, but how to deal with this.
Yes.
It was a shocker, but it happens. And there are a whole lot of so many different things that happen that other people who haven't gone through this are unaware of.
Right.
And including some what I call stupid questions. And it's as though, I mean, when are you going to sell your house? Sell my house. It's my home. I mean, can't you find something else? Like if they ask, how are you? Say, how are you today? You know, each day is different. And I pull together a lot of these insipid questions so that
when you really think about them. No, I'm kidding. Insipid. I like that. Okay.
It really, they don't realize. And there are a whole list of these things that I attack in the book because, I mean, it was like stroke and things that people asked or things that people were afraid and backed away. But, you know, instead of saying, is there anything how are you today? Do you need anything today from the store? It's just little things. And if you can't deal with this, get out of the way.
Yeah.
But there are so many, and people don't realize that they're being stupid. Like my brother-in-law who said just the other day, and I attacked him for it, are you going to sell your house? I'm not going to sell my house. My brother-in-law took 4 years to sell his and then move with his children. I'm not moving with my children. Heck, I'm hoping to go on the Siberian Express. It's next summer with my son. It just, there are things to do.
Sure.
These stupid questions don't help. And
it seems to me that people are so uncomfortable. They're so uncomfortable, of course, with the idea of death. We push it out as, you know, as far out of our minds as we can possibly push it. And also disability. We push that, you know, potential, outcome out so far. And so what's left is this discomfort about about that part of the human condition. And so stupid things come out. But I don't know if it's, I think a lot of it's just total discomfort with the whole notion of it.
Well, that's unfortunate because all of us are going to die. And all of us are going to have, we'll have the experience if we're not the first to die. And it's something that shouldn't be kept back because you have to be able to speak about it. And you have to be able to come up with a few things. What can I do for you? It's a nice way to begin. It's there are a whole list of things, and I tackle it head on because there was a dear friend who he was Herb's friend first, and we were friends for Herb and I were married 56 and a half years, and I thought he was my friend too. And after I sent him the link to the funeral, I didn't hear from him. And I called him to say why, ask why. And he said, well, that's not my way. And I won't say on this what I told him in clear words and erased him from my book. But people don't know and they're awkward. But death is part of living. And I've had so many beautiful responses from neighbors, from people, even the nurses who took care of her because he died at home, and that was our choice. And he had been on hospice. Well, hospice wasn't much. That's another story. But I did have 24/7 for many of those months, 7 months. And beautiful people. But going back, Herb and I for those 20 years of his stroke, made sure that we did everything we wanted. And although he was in a wheelchair, I mean, we went to Turks and Caicos. We had friends there who also had a setup for a stroke survivor. And we went to a hotel in Cancun for 3 years. I had to straighten them out the first time and work with them. But after that, it opened up. And we went to Stratford, the Shaw Festival, the Shakespeare Festival, the Shaw Festivals. We did all those things. And I promised Herb that as long as he kept working with me, we'd open up doors. It wouldn't be the same, but we'd open up doors that others didn't open. And we did. It was only in the last 2 years when he caught cold in his fitness center from someone who shouldn't have, an instructor who shouldn't have been there.
Wow.
That it started going downhill. So there's a little fury in our book of lessons learned, but more to give address the questions that people are afraid to ask, and then provide some of the answers from other people, how they have done it also. And it's not only about COVID, because most of the people I've interviewed had their experiences before COVID.
Right. For the Next Steps book, the Widowhood.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I want to jump over to Lessons Learned for a second, the stroke book, and that is online right now. You put it online, free access, and people are getting that information from all over the world. Could you tell us a little about that?
Both books, the lessons have lessons learned, but One Stroke, Two Survivors was the first, and then this was the one that I wanted people not to have a hardback, but something that they could carry with them into the hospital. Right. And I monitor this online to see where, once a month, I get the reports. And I've had them from all over the US and Canada, and now from China, and from countries all over that I guess it's in translation. I'm not sure, but I know who's reading. I know which sections they're reading. And after the Cleveland Clinic had published both books, and when the rights reverted to us, my son set up a website so that people, onestroke2survivors.com, and people can just hook in and take whatever they choose from it. And we just wanted to share. And I'm always surprised at where, as I monitor, this is being read. And I had letters from all over the world because I have an email address in the book. And it's fun. It's fun to know that people are reading, and I hope that they benefit from my lessons learned.
Yeah.
These were hard lessons to learn.
Sure. So right now, for the brand new manuscript you have, after your reviewers are finished with the Widowhood book, will you be actively seeking a publisher?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's really a workbook because it has under 100 pages, but it's the essence of what I want to communicate. That was really communicated to me directly. I picked it up from different people. I interviewed, I experienced, but nothing was in one place. And so the lessons learned come at the end of each chapter.
So you're doing the work for others. You're paving the way.
Well, I'm trying.
Yes, to help people in a really terrible time to at least get through it in a little easier fashion.
I'm sharing.
Yes, thank you. Did you want to talk just a bit about your marketing communications background?
Well, I began in a very small town where I grew up as head of the Chamber of Commerce on why people should come to this town. And then I headed that group for a number of years while I went through college. And I went to work. Well, my mother died and I had to stay home for a year, take care of kid sister. But I went to work for Reuter and Finn in New York, which was then the largest PR company. I thought through my Chamber of Commerce experience that I really knew PR. And I found myself as a secretary, but I was such a terrible secretary. I always wanted to know if I could write. And from that point on, we worked together, and he later went off to a different company, and that had all the old silence, all the old films. And I went as his assistant director of PR, and did that, and roamed around New York for a couple of years, and decided that I really wanted to go back to law school, which was what I wanted. And so I went to law school at night, taught during the day. And when I met Herb, I was in law school. I did not want any interruption. And he screwed it all up.
Yeah.
7 months. And then I switched back to PR. And that I could do and work on my master's of history at night with 3 children. Mm-hmm. So we moved to Cleveland after I was director of PR at an agency in Columbus, and had to start again and worked my way up to vice president of PR at an agency. And then Herb and I in 1987 decided that we didn't like the way the world was turning, our companies were turning, and Herb he had been with Patel Memorial Institute in Columbus as division head of electronics economics, but a lawsuit took away the Patel portfolio. And so in Cleveland, I started with that other agency, but we combined Herb's background in high tech and mine in PR. And we decided to merge our talents in PR, marketing, communications with a high tech niche. And we had clients in Silicon Valley and Boca Raton and in New York, Baltimore, and Cleveland. And the client in Silicon Valley raved to his Hong Kong investors that we were the special boutique PR firm. And,
the experts in public relations.
Yeah. And when Herb had his stroke and came home from the hospital and recovery, I tried to get him back into using the computer. And that's how One Stroke came about, because it was my way to get him. And he was typing with one finger, but that's what it was all about. And when we finally, my son was my editor. And I didn't know how to write a book. So I did each chapter as a separate file and then sent it off to California to him. And he sent me back a big box of pages. And there were lines, cross out, cross out, cross out. Every once in a while, something was circled. And every once in a while, rarely something good. I put the box away, sat on the floor shaking my head, and a month later came back to it and started again. And I wanted our book to be the one that had both the comments from the survivor and the comments from the caregiver. And that was One Stroke, Two Survivors. And at .com, if anyone wants it. And then I did not want an expensive book. I wanted people to have, something that they could carry, a soft cover that they could put in their back pocket and carry with them to the hospital, because these were all the lessons I learned in the hospital, including how to get attention.
And we both have copies of it. Yes. So we can both hold them up. Yay. It is. And I just want to remind you that the copy editor I worked with at Cleveland Clinic Press exclaimed while she was copy editing this book, that everyone should know, what's in this, and what this information in this book, that everyone should have a copy of it. So now everyone can. All I have to do is, print it out from your website.
onestroke2survivors.com. And I asked questions. I couldn't figure out why it was so difficult to get help, to get experts. And I then had to go outside and find them also. Mm-hmm. We found a cardiologist in Baltimore, Maryland, and we'd go every 6 months because I wanted my questions answered. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to fight for it. And because of that, because finding the right doctors in the right places, the right answers, we had 20 years together.
Yes.
And I'm very, very grateful for that.
Yes.
His urn sits on top of my buffet. And every morning I say hello. And it's not the way it used to be, but it's important to me.
Yes.
And my son has the directions that someday when my ashes are there, he's going to mingle them and send them off to a river, a lake, an ocean, but not a creek. I grew up with small towns, small creeks. So we'll take it.
It's got to be a bigger body of water, gosh darn it. For Berenice and Herb, and I had the pleasure of knowing Herb, and a very wonderful man. So I know you missed him terribly, and I so appreciate you sharing this hard time in your life, but the lessons that came out of it. So thank you, Berenice.
It was important to share.
Yes,
because I looked for those answers elsewhere and couldn't find them. So that's what you do. You put them together. And
great insights and great information. So thanks very much. Okay, this is Kate Thomas with At Home Radio. Until next time, please listen to Berenice and consider gathering your important documents and putting them somewhere safe, because you never know. And it's really important. If it could be decades of a relationship or not even, but you need to have those because life goes by so fast and we're at such a pace in our lives. So it's easy for important documents to get lost in the shuffle. So thank you, Berenice, for reminding us of that.
At Home Radio. Creator and presenter, Kate Thomas. Music and video produced by Jonathan, the producer.